Shortly after the release of Suikoden 4, Konami was quick to reveal a new spin-off title for the series, Rhapsodia. No, I'm serious, the game's Japanese title is Rhapsodia, which I believe is derived from the Greek term rhapsody, which means to be part of an epic poem used for reciting. Regardless, we in the English world know this game as Suikoden Tactics. The game released less than a year after Suikoden 4 on November 8, 2005 in North America. As I mentioned at the end of the last part of the retrospective, Suikoden Tactics serves to further expand the narrative and setting established in Suikoden 4, taking place before and primarily after the events of that story. So, does Suikoden Tactics manage to be a compelling experience despite being tied to the weakest main entry of the series, or is it merely another mediocre addition? Suikoden Tactics is set once again on the island nations from Suikoden 4, and as well as the Kulak Empire. The beginning of the game takes place many years prior to the events of 4. We even get to see a young Snow and the hero. A recurring theme throughout this game will be seeing familiar faces from Suikoden 4, with many of the 108 Stars of Destiny being playable characters or making simple cameo appearances. You can even import your Suikoden 4 save data for some neat bonuses, including some previously mentioned characters becoming playable upon loading a cleared save file. Anyway, the story follows a young man named Krill and his investigations on rune cannons, the very same used in naval combat in Suikoden 4. Krill's search for the rune cannons primarily takes place 3 years after the Island Nation War and will have him follow some loose plot threads from the previous game, but sadly, the overarching story is your standard fantasy fare and is easily one of the weakest stories told in the entire Suikoden series. You'll see each plot twist coming from a mile away, which is especially tiresome since the game loves to build them up. The most satisfaction I got from the story was seeing many of the returning characters from Suikoden 4, which gave them some actual time for character development. The story is a little more than a means to get from one battle scenario to the next, and your enjoyment will be highly variable. I personally did not care for it. Much like the Suikoden game, Suikoden Tactics does not focus on the recruitment of the 108 Stars of Destiny, instead favoring to focus on its own cast of characters and their story. The new characters are okay for the most part. I certainly prefer having a lead character with a personality over the silent protagonist of Suikoden 4. As the name of the game inherently implies, Suikoden Tactics is a tactical RPG and is quite faithful to its genre, perhaps a little too faithful. The gameplay of Suikoden Tactics is quite literally exactly that of any tactics game you may have ever played. I've seen many reviews at the time of its release draw comparisons to Final Fantasy Tactics and Shining Force, which is surprisingly an efficient way of describing how the game plays. I don't really have much to say actually. Suikoden Tactics is every tactics game ever created. It adds almost nothing new to the grid-based formula aside from adding some Suikoden staples, like runes replacing any other game's magic command and integrating unite or co-op attacks. Suikoden Tactics even borrows the permadeath system from Fire Emblem, with only a few key plot-relevant characters having immunity. Despite borrowing from many games in the genre, Suikoden Tactics introduces elemental fields. These spaces correspond with the 5 different elements that are placed on the map by the movement of elemental spirits or by using certain spells. Each character has an affinity with an element. Having a character with the same affinity as an elemental field they are currently standing in will provide that character with various buffs, or if they do not, the character will receive various handicaps instead. The elemental field system provides an interesting means of controlling the battlefield, and it can be really abused if you know what you're doing, or lead to your downfall in many battles. Character development is handled largely similar to other games in the series, as you'll be sharpening each party member's weapons, buying new equipment and items in towns. The skill system introduced in Suikoden 3 even makes a return, with characters being able to purchase different skills like damage or defense increases, or increasing the amount of times a character can attack. Just like Suikoden 3, each skill is governed by different lettered ranks, with many being locked until the player fulfills certain conditions. The game lacks a world map and uses menus to progress through different locations and simple cutscenes to progress through the story. You can recruit characters in towns by finding them through gossip conversations, or you can recruit them Fire Emblem style in the middle of battle by having a specific character talk to them. The developers even took the support system from Fire Emblem as they emulate it in the goodwill system. Some characters can converse with one another mid-battle. These conversations increase the goodwill level between the two, with higher levels of goodwill resulting in offensive and defensive buffs when they are near one another. Some unite attacks are only unlocked through talking to one another. Aside from the main story missions, you can find quest guild buildings in various towns which supply side quests, with money and experience as a reward for completing them. Some even lead to recruiting more party members. Suikoden Tactics successfully takes staples of the series and combines them with the gameplay ideas taken from many giants of the genre. But Suikoden Tactics may lack in original ideas, it makes up for in execution and overall solid gameplay. Being a fan of strategy RPGs myself, I really enjoyed playing through all 30 or so hours of the game, and I am hard pressed to imagine any fan of the genre not really enjoying this. While this game does look sharp from a gameplay standpoint, the same cannot be said for the game's visuals. Suikoden Tactics looks drastically different than Suikoden 4. Character models are super deformed in appearance and look much less detailed than those shown in the previous PlayStation 2 Suikoden games. Environments are low detail pre-rendered backgrounds that time has simply not been kind to. Previously in my own review of Suikoden 4, I criticized the visuals for looking behind the times for a title released so late in the PlayStation 2's life. I will be echoing the same criticism here, as Suikoden Tactics simply looks bad for a 2005 PlayStation 2 title. The game appears like it would be more at home on the PSP rather than a home console. However, like its predecessor, Suikoden Tactics makes up for what it lacks in graphical presentation in its soundtrack and overall sound design. Characters are voiced, and the overall voice acting is well done for the time. Not great, but good for the most part. Suikoden Tactics possesses one of the best soundtracks in the series, which in my opinion eclipses the soundtracks of the previous two main entries. Copies of the game even include the soundtrack, which is a testament to its quality. So despite being tied to what I consider to be the weakest entry in the Suikoden series, Suikoden Tactics manages to be a worthwhile tactical turn-based RPG. Even containing a relatively weak story and not adding much in the way of innovation, I'd say the game is still a worthwhile addition to the library of any fan of the genre or the series. Like every other Suikoden PlayStation 2 title, it is uncertain whether or not it will make an appearance on the PlayStation Network, so you'll have to track down a physical copy of the game for the time being, if you wish to add it to your own collection. Luckily, like Suikoden 4, the game has remained fairly cheap and can be purchased online for around $15 to $30. Well, that's all for now. Next time in the Suikoden Retrospective, I'll be looking at the final entry in the main series, Suikoden 5. I hope you all join me then. As always, it's been Darren the Gaming Pilgrimage. Till next time.